You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast, where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, we are continuing with the summer school series, and we are working through the principles reflecting the essential personality characteristics of effective play therapists in Innovations in Play Therapy, edited by Garry Landreth. So we have gotten through the first three, and we are now moving into principles 4 and 5 today. The fourth is being sensitive to the child's feelings and reflecting those feelings in a way that helps the child develop understanding. And the fifth is the therapist believing deeply in the child's ability to act responsibly and solving personal problems and allowing the child to do so. So if you'll notice, I'm going to go into these in depth and read specifically from the text. But if you'll notice, this is reflective of 2 of the 4 pillars of the child-centered play therapy model. So we have the reflecting feeling skill, and we have the choice giving and returning of responsibility in the 5th. So you can see how now some skills are also being referenced in the way that we interact from a principled perspective and allow that to become part of our personality traits in interacting with kids in a child-centered playroom. So we're going to read a little bit from each of these sections. So I am, again, in Innovations in Play Therapy, Issues, Process, and Special Populations, edited by Landreth, and I'm reading on page 26 for the 4th principle and 27 for the 5th principle. So in its total description, the 4th principle is that the therapist is always sensitive to the child's feelings and gently reflects those feelings in such a manner that the child develops self-understanding. So before we get into the specific details of that, let's spend a little bit of time unpacking just the principle itself. One of the major responsibilities we have as a child-centered play therapist is to serve as the bridge between the head and the heart for a child. And what I mean by that is children live in their hearts, they are emotionally driven, and they are completely consumed by the here and now feeling of whatever they're experiencing. So therefore, we understand they're not rational, they don't have abstract reasoning, they're not going to cognitively process anything. So what happens is they are in their feelings, living in their heart. By the way, related aside, that's why we don't ask questions, because questions put kids in their heads and they live in their hearts. So that creates an internal war. Okay, so along the same vein, as a child is feeling something, the 4th principle says that we are always sensitive to the child's feelings. Why? Because children's feelings are always valid, even if behavior is unacceptable. And so we're always sensitive to the child's feelings, and then we gently reflect those feelings. Why? So that the child develops self-understanding. How does that happen? They don't have the cognition to connect what's going on. They're just feeling what's going on. So when we say, "You're so surprised that that popped out of there," they now have a cognitive piece to connect to the emotional experience. And that allows them to develop self-understanding. This is why the reflecting feeling skill is so powerful. Yes, it builds an emotional vocabulary. Yes, it builds self-control. Yes, emotional IQ is formed. There's a lot of other benefits too. But biggest picture, it is the bridge between the cognitive and the emotional. All right, so let's read a little bit of the description here on page 26. So it starts by saying, adults rarely attempt to comprehend the subjective world of children. And that's true. Kids are dismissed, ignored, hushed, commanded, dictated. They don't get a lot of adult goodness in many scenarios. So adults rarely attempt to comprehend the subjective world of children, yet until that private world is accepted and understood, children are not free to explore, to share their struggles, or to change. There's what all of what we do is predicated on. If the child's private world is not accepted and understood, they're never free to explore, share their struggles, or to change. That's self-actualization. Go back to Rogers. Let's think back to the core conditions. Let's think back to what he mentioned about the relationship and the fact that people want to change, but there has to be a relationship and environment that allows for it. Well, if a child's private world isn't accepted and understood, they are incapable of doing so. Okay, very important. So once we realize that, to continue, to perceive that private world of the child, the therapist must listen intently not only to what is being said, but also to the way it is voiced and to what is left unsaid. There's the nonverbal component of reflecting feelings. Continuing, the play therapist pays attention to the messages the child communicates through activity and behavior. A child is always communicating to us. It's usually not verbally, but through their activity and behavior and their nonverbals, they communicate volumes. So it's our job to be alert to those. So continuing, the therapist is alert to recognize feelings the child is expressing through play or conversation and attempts to reflect these feelings accurately to the child. First pillar. We reflect feelings. Okay, continuing. The play therapist must maintain a high level of emotional connection and participation with the child in order to enter into the child's private world with sensitivity. The therapist acts as a mirror, reflecting the child's thoughts and feelings. Through this careful reflection, the child can begin to understand his or her attitudes and perceptions, and in time, change them. Wow. That is self-actualization in a paragraph. So, teasing apart components. We maintain high emotional connection and participation so that we can enter into the child's world with sensitivity. Then we mirror back to them their thoughts and feelings so that they can begin to understand attitudes and perceptions and change them. That's the beauty of the child-centered model. Okay, and then continuing, the therapist works hard to understand the child's world, to recognize the child's feelings, and to allow the child to express those feelings. Sensitive understanding takes place to the degree that the therapist is able to release her or his own reality and expectations and enter with appreciation into the world of the child. Let me read that again. That's a doozy. In a good way. Sensitive understanding takes place to the degree that the therapist is able to release her or his own reality and expectations and enter with appreciation into the world of the child. Okay, that harkens us back to our earlier principle. The second principle, the therapist experiences unqualified acceptance of the child and does not wish that the child were different in some way. All right, so when we understand that we do not want the child to be any different than what they are. We don't want them to feel anything different than what they feel, act any different way than how they act, think any differently than how they think. We have to get our own reality and expectations out of the way. And we have to have sensitive understanding, but that only takes place to the degree that we can get our own stuff out of the way. Do you see that? This is why child-centered play therapy is so hard, y'all. Be so proud. I hope you are so incredibly deeply proud of doing this for a living and the investment that it takes and the skill that it takes and the work that it takes. I hope that that fulfills you at such a deep level that you are pouring so much into your skills so that you can pour into kids and help them to become better versions of themselves. If that doesn't make you feel like you've fulfilled your reason for being on the earth, I don't know what could. So we get ourselves out of the way, and then we enter with appreciation into the world of the child. And then continuing, in this regard, effective play therapists have a high tolerance for ambiguity, which allows them to enter the child's world as a follower. If you have an issue with ambiguity, that needs to be at the top of your prayer list. Lord, please help me to be better with ambiguity so that I can be better at my job, so that I can be better for kids, so that kids can become better versions of themselves. Oh my. We have to have a high tolerance for ambiguity so that we can enter the child's world as a follower. So important. Okay, that was a good one. Wow. All right. Fifth principle. The therapist believes deeply in the child's capacity to act responsibly, unwaveringly respects the child's ability to solve personal problems, and allows the child to do so. Okay, so this is kind of a three-piece here. So we believe deeply in the child's capacity to act responsibly. That is assuming the best. Secondly, they unwaveringly respect the child's ability to solve personal problems. That is providing them freedom and autonomy and knowing that they can handle it. And third, allowing the child to do so, giving them the space. All right, so let me read from this section on page 27. Play therapy concentrates on the child as a growing and ever-changing person. The play therapist believes that the child is constantly striving to make sense of his or her often confusing world. Isn't that at the root of so many of the issues that come into our playrooms? Kids are trying to make sense of confusion in their world. In 100 different ways, the world is extremely confusing. And kids are just trying to make sense of the confusion. Okay, continuing. The therapist trusts that the child's inborn motivation is toward health, independence, and self-actualization, and believes that the child has the capacity within himself to become more mature if given the opportunity. I literally just talked about all that, right? So this is what we believe. Everything hinges back to that. Okay. The play therapist knows that healthy children must be problem solvers and communicates an inner faith in the child's ability to work out his own problems, to recover, and to adapt. Let me read that again. The play therapist knows that healthy children must be problem solvers and communicates an inner faith in the child's ability to work out his own problems, to recover, and to adapt. This is why we provide choices. This is why we esteem build. This is why we encourage. We are communicating ad nauseum. You are capable. You are competent. I trust you. You can trust yourself. I believe in you. You can believe in yourself. Because inherently we know that you have to be a problem solver to be a healthy child. Incredible. Okay, continuing. The play therapist sees the individual as important, capable, and dependable, and helps the child become independent by allowing the child to assume responsibility for making decisions and choices. Choice-giving pillar. The therapist does not try to make things happen or pressure the child to change. We don't speed up the process. We don't make suggestions. We don't hint at things. We don't nudge a child in a direction. We don't try to make things happen or pressure the child to change. The decision to change or not to change behavior always remains with the child. Okay, that's the end of that section of the book. However, I'm going to ad-lib a little bit here. The decision to change or not to change behavior always remains with the child. However, if we believe everything we've already talked about, and if we embody these 5 principles we've already talked about, and if we go back to Rogers' core conditions and we understand the process of self-actualization, then the child will inevitably choose to change. So while that sounds very nebulous and undecided, the decision to change or not to change behavior always remains with the child. I can see a parent or a critic or an adult that does not understand this model saying, well, then the child would just choose not to change. And then why can you even say that this is going to work? If the child gets to make the decision of whether or not to change or not, and they just choose not to, then we're right where we started. Well, let's talk about all the things we've already talked about And in light of those things, we know that the child will always choose to change because they want to self-actualize. They want to be the best version of themselves. No one stays stuck in maladaptive behaviors if they have the time, the tools, and the opportunity, the relationship, and the environment, which allows them to move out of it. So are there conditions that are required? Of course, just like the core conditions with Rogers, client-centered, right? Does a relationship need to exist? Yes. Does the environment need to be appropriate? Yes. That's why we have a playroom. But with all of those factors, the child will inevitably choose to change. So fifth principle, we believe deeply in the child's capacity. Let me try that again. The therapist believes deeply in the child's capacity to act responsibly, unwaveringly respects the child's ability to solve personal problems, and allows the child to do so because they will. All right, y'all. I hope that encourages you this week. We're halfway there. These are gold nuggets. Oh my gosh. I know this stuff and I teach this stuff, but just diving into it and really processing it and working through it, it makes me excited and it makes me so humbly grateful to have this as a career. I can't tell you the number of days that I think to myself, I get to play with kids and watch them evolve, and it's my job. And yes, part of my job is to coach and train and, do all kinds of things with therapists too. But in a playroom with a child, what an incredible space to say, this is what I do for a living. And I'm honored and blessed to feel that that's the gift that I've been given. So I hope you feel the same. I hope you know how much I love you. I hope you have a great week. We'll talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.